Okay, so welcome everyone to True Tuesdays, our offering and community space to look at equity in rural Minnesota. Today's session, interviews with social justice workers, part 2. So this is part 2 of this particular series, really focused on local media and equity. I'll be hosting and joining me today to give us a great session is Gail Anderson, and I'll introduce her in a little bit. As a grounding, I'm just going to ask us to take 3 collective breaths. And as we take this first breath, deep breath in, let it be a breath of presence, releasing what may have been in front of us previously to joining in and releasing concerns about what might be coming next, giving ourselves permission to really be here in this moment fully. And as we continue breathing, let our second big deep breath be a grounding breath, letting our focus anchor here for a bit, a breath that sets good intentions for our engagement in today's discussion. And let this third breath be the biggest breath that you've taken yet today. Really fill those lungs up completely. Let it be a breath that's deep, representing our willingness and ability to move a little bit further down our path toward equity and justice. And release it. Thank you all for that. I know just taking a moment helps me get here and present. I hope that does the same for you. As we move on to our purpose, thanks. We welcome and support practitioners of all levels of engagements because we recognize that there's a range of experiences amongst us all. And we also know that this is a journey and not a destination. And so we're all learning and we're all growing. And I think at our highest aspiration, this is a co-learning space, a space of connection and relationship, and also of action to disrupt ideologies, structures, systems of oppression, so that rural Minnesota can be a safe, inclusive, and prosperous space for us all. And with that, as I welcome you into True Tuesdays, to let you know that we're also looking for partners. We're expanding the partnerships. So we're looking for partners to join us, shaping True Tuesday content. There's a bit more information there on the slides. And if you're interested, let us know in the chat box and we will follow up with you shortly after this. But if you're interested in joining the partnership and thinking and working together to bring these True Tuesday events and engagements to life, then let us know that. We welcome you. For our rational aims, very tangibly today, we'll be diving into partnering and leveraging local media for equity and change making. And some of the rational aims, sharing best practices, making authentic connections, partnering and cooperating and sparking new ideas. And I think we'll definitely get to all of those aims today. As we move into our experiential aims, and we recognize that and acknowledge the importance of leveraging all of our wisdom centers in this work. And I said it before, we hope that in addition to putting something on your mind, that we also put something on your heart and that you have some motivating and moving experiences as well. As we like to ground in our 4 agreements as well, I'm gonna share them in the way that makes sense for me. You'll see them there on the slides, but really speaking our truth, entering this conversation with a willingness to share what's real for you, your lived learned experience, what you've experienced personally, even if that's not real for others. And I know that's a lot easier said than done. But I think that the second agreement around experiencing discomfort, acknowledging that we're going to feel discomfort, particularly in conversations around race and equity and justice, and that discomfort they're learning edges. They're spaces where learning happens and healing and change can begin, which allows us to continue to really be rooted in speaking our truth and to stay engaged. Sometimes when we get uncomfortable, particularly around these topics, society gives us permission to disengage from these conversations. So making a commitment to stay engaged rather than disengaging when things get comfortable ensures that we can have these important conversations, that we can build and strengthen our relationships as we continue to move forward together. And then finally, expecting and accepting non-closure. We likely are not going to solve anything today, but rather our work is to engage and identify an action or two, a step or two that we can take next, that we can take now in order to, again, move equity and justice forward. So with that, I am going to stop talking here very soon. I just need to introduce our fantastic host today. Gail Anderson of EmpathyWorks is presenting her second of 3 sessions spotlighting rural justice workers. She has more than a dozen years experience building relationships among people of different faiths and cultures. She was the director of Unity and Relationships at the Minnesota Council of Churches for almost 8 years. Prior to working relationship building, Gail was a TV reporter and producer. So very much in tune with our subject matter of today. She has a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and founded a corporate communications company called Smart Communications. She is personally and professionally interested in how local media can work towards transforming understandings of equity. Me too, Gail. I turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Camille, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm going to take a step backwards. I'm going to share a slide here. Last week, or last time we met, which was 3 weeks ago, the topic was when hate comes to town. And we talked a lot about stuff that was happening in rural Minnesota that was scary. I mean, honestly, it was kind of scary. So I know that some of you, especially in evaluation, said, boy, we need some skills. And so I'm going to, this particular shoulder-to-shoulder campaign is not connected to True Tuesdays or the True Partnership, but it is a organization, a national organization made up of religious communities, but the training is not religious. And shoulder-to-shoulder is, they do training to counter Islamophobia. So this is coming up. It starts on February 24th. It's a free 3 live sessions. And then there's some videos and stuff you watch. I did the pilot with them. I think it's really good. So the link is at the bottom and it'll get sent out afterwards too, but it's shouldertoshouldercampaign.org/trainings. So I'm going to just offer that to you because I know some of you last week were going, what do we do? So that is one thing. So today we're going to talk about, oh, I lost my little controller. Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things here. We're going to talk about local media and how it can help, and you know what TRUE stands for. I'm going to keep going back to that. That is our purpose, transforming rural understanding of equity. And we're covering a lot of ground in a lot of these different sessions. But when I was out doing some research last year, there were a lot of places that said they really kind of depended on some local media to support them. And there's probably other ways that they could be supportive if you know how to approach them. So, so I'm going to talk about that. So media in general has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. So rural Minnesota, one thing, you may have a local newspaper, it may not be owned by local people. It may be owned by a company out of Alabama or someplace. It doesn't mean your local editors aren't doing a good job, but it means your local media is beholden to somebody as far as looking at least profit and loss sort of things. And then people have a whole lot of places that they can look and find information that they want to find besides local media. So when I was in journalism school, we learned about the gatekeeper. So the gatekeeper was the editor. The information came in, the editor decided what was valid information, what was not valid. And today we live in many ways without a gatekeeper. So I'm going to share, I hope, this little video, and please react to it in the chat if you want to. All right. Here we go.
Person. People. Person realizes people need.
Hey people, what do you want? Some news? Yeah, some news. We want news. Some news, please.
Person gives people news.
The world is round. Ooh. Wow. It's going to rain tomorrow. Wow. Less people are dying because technology is improving. Oh, wow, that's so cool. Bad things happen here and then, but oh my god. We have police to catch the bad guys, so it's okay. Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
The next day.
The news is still pretty much the same as yesterday. Okay.
A few days later.
Yeah, the news is still the same. This is getting boring now. Yeah, this is getting boring.
A few more days later.
Anything interesting happen or? Nah. I don't like the news anymore.
A wild news competitor appears.
Everybody, I have more news. Yay! Yay! Hurrah! Hooray! A man died yesterday. Oh no, that's so sad. Hey, you're stealing my audience by only telling them worst-case scenario stories which take advantage of a human cognitive bias. That means we naturally pay more attention to negative events. Screw you, pal.
The competition for attention begins.
Hey, some random celebrities that you don't care about are getting divorced. Oh no, not the celebrities. Dear. Hey everyone, the sun gives you cancer. Why is this so entertaining? Bacon gives you cancer. Terrorists, they're coming to get you. There's a virus spreading around the world. Nobody can do anything to stop it, and you're all going to die.
Okay. You can't still hear music, right? It's not about local news, but it's a little bit about what you're up against when you want to get your good news out there. You want to get your good things that you're doing in your community. There's a bias against that. And there's a lot of competition. And you know about clickbait, and you know about, man bites dog is going to bleeds it leads, all that sort of thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about with a couple of people who do local media, hear about how you can connect to them and what's important to them. And then I'm going to do a little presentation at the end about writing letters to the editor and how you connect. So our first person today that we're going to hear from is Heidi Holtan, and she is the public affairs director. Is that right? Am I getting that right, Heidi?
Yeah,
at
News and
KAXE
Public Affairs.
Radio
Yep.
in Grand Rapids, and actually reaches a lot of other communities other than Grand Rapids. And Heidi, you've been interested in doing radio for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I studied
I need to
it.
hear you.
Oh, can you hear me? I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Radio, there's something I've always been attracted to. it's personal. There's something very personal about the voice and that connection. When I'm on the radio, I'm talking not to the audience of people, but to one person and to whatever they might be doing. And that's because when you're listening to the radio, you're almost always alone. You know, if someone's there, you're not really listening that much. So you're in a car, you're at your computer. And so I think for me, that's what draws me to this media.
So tell me about KAXE. KAXE. Who do you serve?
What'd you say?
What kind of radio is it and who do you serve?
Well, we are a National Public Radio affiliate. We were the first rural public radio station in the nation. We began in 1976, so I think that means we're coming up to our 45th birthday soon. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting did not think rural people would listen to public radio, so they didn't grant us a license for many years. So we had to kind of work away at that. We have studios in Grand Rapids and in Bemidji, but we have translators also in Brainerd and in Ely. So we go almost to the North Dakota border to the west. We go up to the Canadian border, to the edge of Duluth, and then a little bit south of Brainerd.
So when we talked earlier, you talk about that your mission is to serve the whole community. What does that mean to you, serving the whole community?
Well, our mission is to build community, and it doesn't mean build community of progressive people or build the community of conservative people. It's to reach our entire audience. And we do that through news. We do it through telling stories, through music, through trivia, lots of different ways. But one of the things we really strive to do is to be I think we describe it as like an eyeball to eyeball, that we are not speaking from above as the authority that knows everything. Our job is to listen and to bring stories to the air that people, may learn something from.
How do you think it's different doing rural radio than doing large city radio? You think there's a difference?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's not the traditional public radio audience. I think we still have a lot of those folks that may, have master's degrees, but we have a lot of working class folks. We have people that aren't traditionally thought of as the audience for public media. And for that reason, we offer different kinds of perspectives. We would much rather speak to, say, if we're doing a story about food insecurity right now, we would like to talk to somebody who maybe is facing this for the first time during the pandemic, rather than talking to an expert out of Washington, D.C., who's going to tell us the reasons why and all this kind of stuff. So we really focus on that kind of individual story as much as we can.
So how's local media changed? I mean, we saw that little silly video, the animation. That's part of it, right? People have lots of places to go, lots of competition.
Yeah, they sure do. And, when you have just about everybody has a political bias nowadays. And when you have that, you can find exactly your bias wherever you want to. And you can start to think that your opinions are the truth because you're hearing that repeated over and over again. I think we've lived long enough with this, with an internet, with 24-hour news cycles. I don't know that people realize sometimes that local media is still here because it's so easy to get the national news all of the time or get that kind of stuff. And I think people aren't quite as connected. It's something I think we've really got to learn, like how do we get people in our local area to listen to us? How do we market to those people? We're so busy and short staffed that we don't have a marketing arm, and so we rely on that we are media, and we hope that people will find us and we get engaged in many ways. But I think it's some education we have to do in small communities that we are here.
How would you tell people to get engaged with you?
We want to hear from people on, it's not always fun to get the negative comments, but we want to know what people think of stories. We want to know, we get people calling in, we get letters, we get recorded messages, Facebook posts. We want them to engage in that way. We want people to tell other people about us so that more people find us and listen to us.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm, and you're kind of representing, let me say, traditional media in some way in rural areas. So, other people aren't in KAXE They're not going to come to you. But everybody's understaffed, right? There's probably not a rural media.
Well, I think in urban areas as well. I think media it's a tough business out there, and everybody's doing a whole bunch of different things.
Right. So if I've got an organization or a project or something I want a little attention to, what would be of interest to you? I mean, people tend to want to come and tell you every single thing about their organization. How do they put that together so that it's of interest to you, that you would think would be interested to your listeners?
Well, I'm looking for a story. I'm looking for a personal story from someone, and I want to know why this matters to the person who is sending me that message, why it matters in a larger sense. A lot of times we get nonprofits that want their events to be on the air. They want to come on the air and talk about it. That's not something that we think is. We want to give nonprofits and organizations time so we can talk about their events, but not long conversations about it. We want to talk about, like, why are you doing this ice fishing event in town? What is that money going towards? Who are they serving? And then maybe talk to the people who are working in those fields, rather than just what time is the event and how do I register and these sorts of things. So the more that someone can tell me why they care about it, the more I'm going to pay attention. And if they need to, I know for me personally, information's coming in a lot of different ways, and I don't always see it every day. And so you have to you have to stay with it, and you have to keep sending messages that it's not that we don't want to do it, but there's not a lot of people that can do this kind of thing. So just to kind of keep connected and start a relationship. If you want, your local media to understand the work you're doing in community, start a relationship with them. Don't just expect that we'll announce everything that you're doing.
You told me about a really interesting project you're doing about climate and climate change in the state. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I even have a little clip that I'm going to play for you. It's really quick. But so Tuesday morning, so earlier this morning, we have a show that's been around for over 30 years. It's called Phenology, and phenology means the rhythmic biological nature of events as they relate to climate. So all that means is that I'm going to tell you when the ice formed on the lake I live on. I'm going to tell you when it opened up this year. And then we're going to take a look at what happened last year and how this is changing. You're going to talk about maybe the tracks you see in the snow and what animal you think did that. So we'll take a listen. We do this there are classrooms around the state of Minnesota that send in their audio reports from their students. So we'll listen to that for just 1 second here.
February. Hello from the North Shore Community School on the North Shore of Lake Superior. This is a phenology report of the week of January 30th, 2021. My name is Amy and I'm your phenologist for this week. February 9th is the night of the sucker moon. It is called the suckerfish moon after the suckerfish because in some places it is easy to net in February. February is the mating season for wolves, squirrels, foxes, and snowshoe hare. Taylor heard wolves howling at night on January 28th.
So that's just a quick excerpt of, I think it was a 3-minute report this morning from the 4th and 5th graders in Duluth. And that's, adults are doing the same sort of thing. So essentially we are talking about climate a lot on our air because we're talking about how things are changing. We're talking about things like what's showing up in lakes, aquatic invasive species, why that's happening. But we are not on there talking about the politics of climate change. We are getting people more connected to nature by, having them learn from students. Most of the time they know a lot more than I do. And it just automatically gets you to pay attention a little bit more. It's kind of like, people don't necessarily care about the quality of water in a lake unless they're swimming in it and they're seeing that the quality is not good. And so to have people do this kind of thing and interact with us, I think really is about climate change in a lot of ways, but it's also very personal and it's storytelling. And who doesn't like cute kids? I mean, their voices, you can't beat that. But we've also heard, we've had many kids who've been listening. I said it's over 35 years old that grew up listening to it and went on, and they are now working in graduate studies and PhDs in climate, in nature, and doing all these things. So we know that this affects people, and it can affect them, for the rest of their lives.
So somebody in the chat has asked if you broadcast online so other people can hear you. Indeed, you do.
We do. We live stream all the time. It's at KAXE.org. We also have there's a phenology podcast. So if you're into nature, you can get that automatically sent to you each week. We do a series called Strong Women, and that's also a podcast. So we have a lot of ways that you can go. You can listen to the live stuff, but you can also listen to our older stories as well.
So let's talk about local media all media, as you said, large city newspapers are also folding. How can people support you? How can people support you and in other media in general? So let's start with KAXE. How can people support you?
Well, I mean, we're a public radio station, so we're on the air 3 times a year asking for money. So that's the simple answer, is to be a member of the station. But it's also just telling people about this station, or telling someone else about it, or sharing some things about it. For me, I've been really trying to work on this myself. I'm in media, so I don't always think of it, for me personally and my habits when it comes to media. And I think it's kind of amazing that I have no problem signing up for Apple TV for a few months because I want to watch a certain show. And then, of course, I forget for the next 6 months. So I suddenly have $4.99 a month. And, I haven't watched it in a year. And that's one of how many streaming services that's going to some corporation somewhere. So think about some of those habits that you have, and maybe you don't need all of them. Maybe you can get a subscription to your local paper. Maybe you can support the community radio station that's in your town, or, another public radio station in the state.
I'm going to add something to that. You have underwriters, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you go into a shop someplace and say, yeah, I heard you underwrote the podcast or the climate stuff on KAXE, that's going to make that underwriter go, oh, I should probably keep doing that. Same thing for if you've got to see an ad in your local newspaper. When you go into that store, say, I saw the ad in the newspaper. It's going to push people to continue advertising or underwriting, that kind of thing. So just keep it's a little thing, costs you nothing, but to let them know that it's important. One last thing quickly, Ampers is a network of radio stations. So you tell me what Ampers is and how you're connected.
We are one of the Ampers stations. There are 18 stations around the state. It's the community and public radio stations that are not part of Minnesota Public Radio. I think the original forming of it had to do with, it was really hard for us to compete for dollars at the Capitol against Minnesota Public Radio. And so it was a way for us to come together. It's stations that are at universities, St. Cloud, UMD. It's also stations from Leech Lake and White Earth and Fond du Lac, and community stations like us, and then WTIP in Grand Marais, and stations in Winona, Thief River Falls. So there's 18 around the state of Minnesota. We get legacy funding together. So we produce legacy programs and we share that programming with each other. Right now we've embarked on, this is kind of new for us. And every Friday I get a chance to host a statewide conversation that's on most of those stations around the state, or at a later time. And we have Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan on with us each Friday, and listeners get to ask questions about COVID-19, because everybody's got a personal story and they want that specific answer. And we've been doing that for almost a year now, which is crazy. But it's been a great way, I think, for people, especially if you live in a rural area and you're not so connected to sources of information about where I can find vaccine, where I can do this kind of thing. They get a chance to ask a question.
That's great. And so there's another way you can support at least public radio, is let your legislators know to keep funding Ampers.
Yes,
and other public media that's out there, because that's where he gets your money from. Thanks, Heidi. This was too short, but I want to bring Josette in here. So Heidi is from kind of mainstream media, legacy media, that radio stations, television, newspapers. Josette started her own TV show. So Josette's from Alexandria, and I just pulled out so your day job is working for Definitive Woman magazine in Alex, and you got there by being their cover girl. You were on their cover story, and then they asked you to continue to work there. She is the founder and co-producer of a TV show called Voices Talk Show, and a podcast called Unapologetically Anxious Me, Confessions of a Haitian Girl in Small Town, Minnesota. 42,000 followers on that podcast. Is that right? Wow. So she's a very passionate social justice advocate. So welcome, Josette, to the
Thank
show.
you for having me.
So tell us about how you get to Alex and when.
Okay. I mean, Alec is kind of happened overnight for me and my family. We were just looking for a new place to start over. I had a brother and sister-in-law who were married at the time who had been here for a while, and they offered to have us come out and just stay with them and, work and, maybe just stay we were really hoping to stay for like 6 months, which clearly that didn't happen. It's been 5 years. So it's been a huge change in our lives, but it's also been a necessary change that really helped us evolve into so much more than what we came here to do, which was just to get stable and find a good paying job.
What was your experience moving there?
So my experience moving here, I moved here with my husband and my son, who was 1 at the time. And we really didn't know much about Minnesota at all. Probably outside of Prince and Vikings. That was pretty much that was where our knowledge stopped. But because we had family here, we just felt that it was going to be a good place for us to just kind of get back on track. We had come from Tampa, Florida, where the job market in 2015 was really struggling. And so here we came, and it was a culture shock from the very beginning when we got to Alexandria. It's a very homogenous, predominantly white community, and being an all Black family, and that I didn't realize how, or even thought about it before I got here, that how different that experience would be for not just me and my family, but for other people who sees us in the community. And it was something that we dealt with right away. It was very clear that as a Black family, being in this community came with other challenges that it wouldn't back home in Tampa.
So you got connected to the Alexandria Inclusion Network. Can you tell me about the Inclusion Network?
Yeah, the Inclusion Network is a group of local, not just Alexandria, but people in central Minnesota who get together specifically in this community to try to make it a welcoming and inviting space for everyone, whatever, despite your background. And after my story came out in the same magazine, Definitive Woman, in 2018, that's when I really connected with Sherry Maloney and Deb Ledoux. And those are, and I don't remember who else, but those are the main people who were, who is the chair and actually responsible for what the Inclusion Network engages in. And I met them in 2018, and I was still a little skeptical. I was still new to the community, so we didn't connect for a while. I kind of pleasantly avoided their messages, and then by early 2019, I was in a place where I was ready to take my life back in a way, and I wanted to find my place in this community, and that's pretty much where I started. I ended up going to an event they were hosting with Jason Soul from the cities of Humanize My Hoodie, and that pretty much was the beginning of everything, and they quickly became my personal community, and that's where I got my sea legs in a way to really just realize like what it is that I can do in a community like this, and to know that my voice also mattered. And that's what the Inclusion Network did for me. They gave me a place to amplify my voice.
So a lot of communities have, you know, a interfaith committee or a multicultural committee or something. What do you think what difference does something like the Inclusion Network make to a smaller community?
Oh, I think it makes a big difference because this is the first super small community I've lived in like this, but I think it gives people who are not, who don't fall into the status quo or the typical group of people that you might see here. It gives them a place to call home. It gives them a space to connect and make real human connections, and also to share their stories and to really feel like they're part of something. The Inclusion Network is very good about engaging with the community and supporting the local arts in the community. And they do a really great job at bringing in BIPOC individuals and just trying to secure that relationship with them. And I think there's many of us we don't realize it unless you're the one who's on the outside experiencing that that distance from people. And I didn't fit in, and it was something that I definitely needed to do to make this place home for my family, and Inclusion Network gave me the space to do that.
So tell me about starting the talk show.
The talk show. So Voices Talk Show is a panel-based talk show that basically it brings everyday members of the community together to discuss important social issues that affect all of us, whether that's race and discrimination, immigration, mental health, all sorts of things. We've even had an episode on mental health and farming and how that specifically affects this area. And we like when it came about, with me just kind of having in my head, my background is in journalism and I'm a writer. And so after I wrote my story and I got to meet the Inclusion Network, I think they gave me that confidence I needed to really think about what it is I can do and how can I make a difference. And it just kind of popped out of my head. I mentioned it probably a little bit when we first met, and then about a year later, I was really passionate about it and really knew that this is what I wanted to do. And they completely supported me in that venture. So we all kind of went in as a team, and till today we're still working as a team. I have my partner, Scott Keene, who's also one of the board members of the Inclusion Network, who does our production. We had season 1 that started last summer, and we started season 2. Well, not last summer, summer 2019. We started season 2 this past fall, and we're moving into season 3, which we are now going to be partnering with Pioneer PBS. So we're going to be reaching a whole new level of audience, and we're actually going to change up the style of the show a bit. We're not going to be panel based so much so as we're going to be like on our feet and out in the real world with the community members and following their stories, talking to people who are here every day and experience those things, and just to show how one conversation can really change so much and can be the domino effect for creating a community where everyone feels like they have a place to grow and to make a good life with their family.
Yeah, so it's called Voices, and you are giving voice to people that are not particularly heard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, we got a question here, and I think this, how do you want to do a Voices program in your own community? How do you start? How did you start?
Well, I definitely had, my backbone has been the Inclusion Network. So I think that for me, I just put my idea out there. I think if you have something like that you're passionate about, don't be afraid to tell people about it, talk about it till someone listens. I'm very blessed that they were there and that they were enthusiastic. And while none of us really knew what to do to put together a talk show or a show of any kind, we all worked together, and where I didn't understand something, they connected me with someone else who might know something. So it was just this huge group effort. And little by little, it became way more than we thought it was going to be. And we've been able to tackle really tough issues and bring together people in the community who otherwise wouldn't come together at the same table to have these conversations. And so my advice would really be to just go for it. And if that starts with you not having an organization to back you up, your phone is there, use that camera, get on social media, write it out, do what you need to do to keep putting yourself out there, because someone is going to listen. And if you're that passionate, it'll happen, because the Inclusion Network took a chance on me and believed in me. And that's why I'm able to do what I'm doing now.
So you told me you connected with like the local high school or school or something that had some gear. Is that how you first started?
Yeah, we literally started little by little. Who could work a camera? So someone, I believe it is our local superintendent, who actually was part of one of our meetings, who was like, oh yeah, we have the audio visual teacher at the high school who knows how to do this. And turned out I met him randomly after a football practice or something he was having, and I was just like, hey, this is what I want to do. So I want to create the view in Alexandria. And it really was interesting because it kind of started from there, and we kept having conversations. Turned out he had just created a small company, video production company, with his partner, who is also a teacher at the school, Eric Hartman. And so between Ty Granning and Eric Hartman, that's really where we got to put our vision together. And my colleagues in the Inclusion Network, like Sherry and Deb, were able to help me find people to actually bring in as panelists, because I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
And so they were so instrumental in helping me connect with people within the community. And it was very empowering to see how many people were willing and open to have these conversations and wanted to share in that experience.
So they got sent, everybody who registered got sent a link, where on your Zoom invite is a link to the Voices. So it's on Facebook and it's on the Inclusion Network's webpage, right? You can see all the episodes.
You can also see full episodes predominantly on YouTube as well, at Voices Talk Show. That's our main platform, and all of the other ones we just kind of push it out to, so that it's more accessible to anyone.
Okay. All right. I want to open it up for questions and bring Heidi back in if anybody has questions of either of our guests. Oh, Deb Ledoux just put in the chat. She's watching you here, so.
Hi.
Hi. Just open your microphone, I guess, and ask a question is how we're going to do it this time, if you have anything to ask.
I have a question. This is Nancy Jost, and I was wondering what the responsibility of media is, or the connection to democracy.
Joe, do you want to go first? Easy question, or I can.
For me, I think I would say the media has a responsibility to speak the truth, and whether that makes some people angry or some people happy, at the end of the day, it is the media that has always kept us together from the very beginning, has kept us informed. And yeah, sometimes it could feel like one place is going one side, and the other place is going to another. But I think it's important that we continue to have faith and media, because it's people like us who are making media honest, who are trying to find a way to bring people together rather than divide people.
I think one of the big things that we are committed to, or I am for sure, is to, try to get people to vote, to get involved in the democratic process. I say it all the time. I've always loved voting, but also that, your elected officials, they're supposed to work for you. And so kind of reminding people of that as much as we can, and ways that they can connect with people. Also, we've done some things. I've heard from people who, had a problem in their community, kind of reached out to us. They wanted to talk about it. We then, I kind of talked with them about how do they connect with their local legislators. They ended up being able to make some changes and to make sure that their organization stayed around and got into the bonding bill. And we kind of were a partner in that process and educating. And I wanted, when we talked about it, I wanted to be very transparent about like how that happened, and that it's supposed to work that way. It doesn't always work that way, but I continue to have faith that you can reach out to your elected officials.
So, other questions?
Yeah, this is Lowell Johnson. I'm from the Brainerd Lakes area, and there's been some anti-racism book clubs started in the area, and the one I've been in has been really interesting. And it's the biggest problem with it, it's been a small group of us and talking about these different books. And I'm wondering if in either Heidi or Josette's communities, there's been any of a kind of expanded book club conversations around in the anti-racism area. Now, how has that gone?
Oh yeah, I know, just stemming off of our organization and the Inclusion Network, we have people who have branched off and have started their own like co-learning circles where they are reading, specific books together, like White Rage and White Privilege and anti-racism. So there's all these different, I think that's one of the amazing things about what I do, what Heidi does, what we do in the media, is that we inspire other people to take responsibility, to be accountable. And something I think I've always really been vocal about within the show is just not being afraid to confront those things, not being afraid to have those tough conversations, and actually take other people's opinions into consideration, and actually bring people together in one space to be able to do that.
And I would say, Lowell, I would love to connect with you and your group and people who are doing this to kind of know what's it been like? What are the books? How are people responding? I think that can spur other people to do this kind of thing. And I think, Lowell, were you a teacher in Brainerd?
No, yes and no.
I thought I was talking to one of my old teachers. I grew up in Brainerd, which seems strange, but that, we want to hear this. I hear it sort of anecdotally. We have a couple of book clubs through our station that the people that are in them are choosing the books they do. But it's something I think we could do more of, because I know it's out there and people are kind of doing this work, and it would help other people know that they could do it too.
I'll connect with you, Heidi, via email, because
Great.
our book club meets on Thursday this week, and I'll bring it up. And I'm
Great.
guessing there'll be some traction to somebody who get in touch with you. So I learned a lot.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, well, one more question here, and then we'll.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Josette and Heidi, thank you for sharing today. Joe, I've watched your videos and they're very inspiring on how you're able to bring community members together. And I'm just wondering, what was the startup cost for something like this? And what's the time element that it took? Because I believe within our true partnership here that there may be other rural communities that have small towns with those public TV channels that are there, that there may be a spokesperson that might be interested in starting something like this in their community. But again, what's the startup cost and what's the time element when you're putting it together?
Oh, so with Voices Talk Show, that it was really quick, actually, because I had so much support from the Inclusion Network. Once we had our production team in place, and they gave us their numbers and we kind of talked about it. So they were kind of, our first season, we contracted out in a way, and we had production people from outside of the organization who we paid, and that was about $15,000 when we started, and we actually were very very lucky to have gotten the West Central Community Action Grant for $10,000, and we got another grant through the Blandon Foundation. And without those grants, I don't think we would have had a Voices. But we started planning and really trying to like bring all of this together probably in May in 2019. By August 2019, we had launched our first episode, and the season 1 with 10 episodes completed was wrapped up by Christmas, right before Christmas that year. So it was a group effort. And I always had the ideas and the creativity, but when it came to the technical part, I had no idea where that went, or how that was going to go. And that's one of the amazing things about being in a small community, is that it's almost easier to find people who, can be who are as passionate as you are about a certain project, and they bringing those people in together, they give you new ideas. Now we'd have our own in-house, production, and me and my awesome partner Scott has really been. We did season 2 for the first time within our own production, and that saved money. And so there's very different routes you can take, but I think that as long as you can bring people together who can, it doesn't have to be perfect at first. Remember, you're always going to grow. And the more you do, the more episodes, the more content you create, the better it's going to be. And I think that if we had to start somewhere, and it was a blessing to start with a bunch of community members who really wanted to see the same thing happen.
So I want to say you all have a camera with you right now, records. I mean, I think it's great that you guys got grants, because I really think people who do this work need to get compensated. That's huge for me. But, we don't have the money, doesn't have to be a barrier in getting this out. We're doing a television show right now, kind of, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yep. And so I think that if you've got the idea and the drive and the distribution on YouTube, and we've got ways to get stuff out that didn't used to happen at all. Used to be a much bigger mountain to climb, and I think you can do it. So, all right, thanks you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing and being here. This has been great.
Thank you so much.
All right, so I am going to share a screen here. And we're going to go through quickly. What do I want to do? I'm not doing it quite right yet.
Person.
Oh,
People.
We'll see here. I'm going to quickly talk to you about writing letters to the editor. And we want this one to go away, don't we? We saw that already. This is just one way to reach out to connect. I think it's really powerful. It's been used by a lot of social justice organizations. If you remember, if those of you who were here last time, when we were reading from the playbook of the people that were bringing hate into town, one of the things they said was, perception is reality and make it seem like everyone in the community believes like you. Writing a letter to the editor or doing other kinds of public outreach is a way to get that perception changed. So this is going to be pretty quick. You have also in your a handout with these tips on it, slightly differently, and a copy of this PowerPoint. So I'm going to go through it quickly so that you can get into your groups and talk with each other. So when you're going to start reaching out to media, whether it's the letter to the editor or you want to talk to KAXE, start paying attention to what they already do. What kind of letters do they print? What kind of shows are on the radio? Just do your research and start paying attention. With your newspaper, look at the local newspaper submission guidelines. If they have letters to the editor, they have guidelines. And then this is like one of the most important things, follow the guidelines. If they say 200 words, do not write it at 250 and hope they will edit it. They don't have time. As Heidi said, everybody is understaffed. If your letter doesn't work in their guidelines, it's going away. So follow their guidelines. As far as timing, as far as topic, as far as all kinds of things. Occasionally there is a requirement that you pay to have something printed. And that is usually around political campaigns when it's for a candidate, because they don't want to get flooded with just one side of a candidate. So, but most of the time, you don't have to pay to get your letter into the newspaper. This is really important, be prepared. And we talked about this last time too, about being organized before something erupts in your community that you need to respond to as far as hate goes. But I think that being prepared on what you want to say and what your letter is going to be, depending on what happens, because you're going to be sort of reactive to something that happened and you're going to write a letter. So this might be research. This might be a file that has anecdotes. This might be that killer opening sentence that you wrote that you haven't had to use yet. Just keep it handy so that you're ready to go. And that's because news is news, and news is fast. So write your letter as soon as you can. Send it in the same day something happens in the news, or if you're reacting to something in the newspaper or a letter somebody else wrote or something that's happening in the community, way before the deadline. And this is why you need to be prepared, because when you know you have to act fast and then you pull up Microsoft Word and there's this blank sheet of, new document, and where do you start? You can get stopped there and never get your letter written. And remember space and time limitations when you send them in. Keep to one point. And if you have multiple points, prepare several letters. And I want to think about what your one point might be. If you're in an organization or a community, the Inclusion Network would be something that is a message that you want to get out. Some of you are lucky enough to work in big organizations and you have communications departments. Most of you don't have that. Just what is your one point that you want to get out? So one main message. And then you support this. And this is from media training, all kinds of things. One main message, some supporting points, a personal story. As you heard Heidi said, that's what she wants to know about your organization, not your funding or your budget or your event, but how are you helping people in the community? What's the personal story? Or you can support it with some data, which lately we need reliable data, an inspiring quote, something, and your value. I mean, hold up a value that's important to you. It's your message. And even if you're the executive director of an organization, you are at that organization because you believe in the mission. It's still your message. So you tell your story in your words, your issues, your passion. That's what's going to make people read. And your tone. Imagine you're speaking to your neighbor or someone after church or parents at the soccer game or the swim meet. People are going to, especially in smaller communities, and I'm in the metro area, but we have the Sun Sailor. I see a letter to the editor. I go right down to the bottom, who wrote this and do I know them? So how would you talk to these people and tell them your story if you were just bumped into them someplace? That's kind of the tone, not formal, not strident, but kind of friendly. Local newspapers are more likely to print letters of local interest, although in scanning the local newspapers around the state, I see people reacting to things like right now, the impeachment might get printed because somebody's got an opinion on that, but more likely they're going to want to talk about something local because there's competition all over the place for the national story. And enlist allies. I think this goes back to getting organized about what your story is. And if we're transforming rural understanding of equity, who can tell this story? Something happens, you want to react to it. Something's going on, you want to tell a good news story about it. It doesn't always have to be you. You don't want to be that person that is always sending the letters to the editor. Josette talked a lot about the allies that she had in order to do her work. Who can step up and do this? And so it creates that impression, which I think is the right impression. Most people agree that that we're transforming rural understanding of equity. And this is what that means to us. And message that we're better together. So this comes out of some research that was done by a group called Faith in Minnesota. It was a national research project. They did a lot of it in rural Minnesota. The number one thing people are concerned about is divisiveness. No matter what side they're on, they're concerned about the divisiveness. You can package your message about equity, about the work that you're doing, about an issue that's important to you, in that we're better together, then you're going to pull people into your message. And these guidelines, I kind of focused on letters to the editor because that's where I've done a lot more of my work, but same thing. If you're going to go speak at the county commission or city hall, you got your point, you got your anecdote, you can use that messaging in the same way. Call in radio show. I have this fantasy that you guys have your notes on your phone and you're here on the radio and you pull over and you like call in and say, yeah, here's the point, that you make it. Social media, that's a whole nother like training, but I sometimes answer people, not the original poster, but I join the conversation with something that maybe other people who are reading that conversation. So these are just some guidelines. Okay, related to letters to the editor are press releases when you have something going on and you need to get the word out about it. There's a link in the pre-work to a site about press releases. It's they want to sell you some stuff, some marketing company. I'm not endorsing that you buy their stuff, but I think they have some really good tips on how to put together a press release. And so two other bits of wisdom. Peg Chamberlain, who was the executive director of the Minnesota Council of Churches when I was there, I heard her say this a billion times: the work is not done until the story is told. So if you're doing really, really, really good work out in your community, you got to tell your story. You got to call Heidi. You got to get on Josette's show. You got to start your own talk show. I don't know how, but you got to tell that story. It's good news and it's a good story. And then DJ Seal, he's a very justice-minded pastor at Chaska, Minnesota, but I know him from previous lives when we were both in show business. He's a promoter. And we were writing out press releases to organizations. We were doing a theater festival. And I said, they're not going to print this. And he said, it doesn't matter. You're educating the editors. Same thing with your letters to the editor. It might not get printed, but it's going to get read. And if you're writing about that issue, eventually those editors are going to go, this is an issue in the community. This is a story in the community. This is something we should be paying attention to. So that was breathtakingly fast. As I said, there's a tip sheet and this PowerPoint in your handout so that you can check back in it. But I really hope you give it some time to think about what are the main points you want to make about what you're doing out in rural Minnesota to transform equity, who can help you tell that story, and where's your evidence of it. So, okay, we're going to go into breakout. I think Camille's going to help us with that. We really want you to talk to each other about your organization, your work, and what your main point is and how you would back that up. It's going to be hard. You're going to go, I don't know, but it's an exercise. So you're going to learn about each other's work by doing this, which is part of what we do here. So
thank you all so much for engaging. Thank you for your great questions to our panelists. Please do connect on resources with one another. Folks have offered various engagements and partnerships, so please do follow up with that. We will also follow up with some information. I'm going to, there we go, thank you. As a closing, what we like to do is just think about the conversation, the discussion, what we've heard, what we've talked with one another about, and put in the chat box an action or an activity that you can take and incorporate into your equity practice on a day-to-day. What's an action that you feel like you can take given the context of our conversation today? And I see a couple of things being added to the chat, so please continue to do that. As far as Village News, we also like to give folks an opportunity to share any events, activities, or resources. There were a number of books that were included in the chat, and we'll make sure that they get added to our running list of resources. But if there are any events that you would like to share out with this group, offering space for you to do that now. You can either verbalize it by unmuting yourself or put information, links, etc. in the chat as well. So I'll just give folks a minute or two to do that. So I'm seeing some great calls to action. And yeah, all right. Well, having no events that have come through or have been verbalized, just give a little bit of preview to our next session. So our next session is part 3 of this series of social justice conversations. And it's going to be on arts equity in rural Minnesota. So Gail, did you want to give us a preview since you are returning as our host for part 3 as well?
Yeah, art can reach us in ways that bypass our head and our overthinking and get, straight to our heart, which is a lot of where our resistance to things about equity happens. So we are going to have a couple of artists on. Cecilia Cornejo, who is Chilean, and she is in Northfield. She has done several place-based art projects, documentary about the Latino community, and she's doing some audio listening. And Amaki Kubat, who toured a play in rural Minnesota called, I'm going to read this because Angry Black Woman and Well-Intentioned White Girl, and then followed that up with community conversations. And then Michelle Anderson, who's the Rural Program Director of Springboard for the Arts, will tell you how you can start thinking about incorporating arts into your work.
I cannot wait. That is going to be so insightful, and I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, those that are here are able to join us. You are invited back, and the link to register is in the chat, so you can do that right now. There's also a link to evaluation, so please give us feedback. It helps inform new topics and how we move forward in our work together on True Tuesdays. We'll see you back here on, I lost the date that quick, March 2nd. March 2nd. Thank you all. Be well. Take care of yourselves and one another. Until next time.
Bye.